Thank you, PS. Director Environment, senior staff from Ministry of Waterways and Environment, um, environmental experts from the industry. Lavinaka to you all. Good morning, should I say. Lost track of time. Ladies and gentlemen, since I've taken this portfolio of environment a few years back, I started to realize how important this position is, how important the ministry is, how important the department is, how important the work that we do is to the overall sustainable development agenda that we are pursuing. And I think over time I have really appreciated also the work that you all are doing. In the beginning I was a bit hard, but over time as we started to appreciate the work that we are doing and how it's science-based, I started to tone down quite a bit. But on the other hand, we also have been getting a lot of suggestions, comments, and some may say complaints from our clients, users of our service, about how, from their point of view, we could do better in terms of timelines, in terms of service delivery, in terms of processing of applications. Then we also have other policymakers, other heads of ministries, ministers, cabinet secretaries, as well, giving their comments, raising their issues about how we could do better or improve our services. When you place all these comments and suggestions and issues, you'll find them, and then you analyze them. You could clearly put them into perspective in terms of one, how interest groups are playing, their part in terms of trying to decide how we should do things. Now, we've been grappling about whether we could fine-tune our processes and relook at how we could deliver the service at a more, in a timely manner in which probably we could fulfill the appetite of these commentators. Over the last 6 months, while we were battling, the country was battling the COVID-19 pandemic, we did take time to take a stock take of what we're doing in terms of processes, the timelines, and how we could do things better. As the dust is settling, we decided to make some changes so that we are able to facilitate the ease of doing business, take into account the problems and challenges the business sector is facing without compromising on the key ethos and key mandate that we have with regard to protection of environment. I also want to say that COVID-19 is now being used by the investors and some in the business sector to fast track and shortchange the processes. That should never happen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have decided to make some changes, and these changes are to expedite the processing of EIA applications, environmental impact applications, to reduce costs incurred by the businesses seeking the EIA permitting services from the Department of Environment. 3, to raise confidence of investors in doing business in Fiji. And 4, to demonstrate better achievements for environmental protection. So these changes that we are saying, it is supposed to, 1, improve the service delivery in a better timeline, and secondly, also to help us ensure that we are able to better protect our environment or better achieve the environmental protection objectives. The decision is expected to positively impact at least two areas in terms of resource extraction, gravel extraction and logging businesses. The decision will also impact the existing processes, and timeline for generally EIA applications. With regard to timeline, the following changes are implemented. For screening any business which would want to establish, they would apply for screening whether they need to undertake an environmental impact assessment. This process, we're looking at completing it from our end and providing a decision in 10 days' time. Currently, it takes 14 days. If an applicant is not happy with the decision of the department on the screening application, then they should apply to the permanent secretary, whose decision will be final, and the permanent secretary will provide a decision within 7 days. The processing of terms of reference, should there be from the decision of the screening application, if there's a decision to undertake an EIA, then they will provide a terms of reference within 20 working days. Currently, it's 30 working days. 30 days. So they will we will reduce that timeline to 20 days. Once a EIA report is provided, the review of the EIA report, including public consultations, are to be done within 30 days, as opposed to 35 days as currently stated. The above are subject to all information being provided, so which implies that the ministry will now check thoroughly, if all the required documentation is provided before accepting the application. So when a client comes up and submits an application, the ministry should only accept, or if the ministry accepts that application, then the ministry can't go back and say later on after 20, 30 days, no, something is missing, that's why we did not process. It's that particular point in time, the ministry must say that whether this application is complete or not. If the ministry accepts that application, then ministry, that reason of saying this form is missing, this page is missing, or signature is missing, all those reasons should not be provided later on when the client, after the timeline, the client says, no, I need to get an answer. So which means ministry has to do some work in terms of ensuring that the person, the receiving officer, must ensure that the person checks it thoroughly to ensure that everything is there. Now, we have also, over the time, have been getting a request of waiver of EIA, and one of the reasons people are giving that, asking to waiver is because they're saying that EIA is very expensive. We can't afford to pay. Now, that cannot happen. If an EIA is required, then you must undertake an EIA. There's no other reason. Otherwise, we're compromising on the environment. We don't know what will happen when the project is undertaken. So to deal with the issue of high cost of EIA, what we intend to do is to regulate the EIA consultancy fees. At the moment, the consultants, the ministry has a catalog, it has a register of all the EIA, all the consultants based on different areas. In some areas, there may be just one or two, a consultant, and therefore they will decide. There is no competition in terms of how much they will charge. So what we intend to do is we intend to regulate the fees that they will charge to a client. For gravel extraction, it could be based on the volume, or the length of the river that they will be extracting. Logging is based on probably the area or the kind of forest, etc., that they are wanting to undertake the logging activity. So pretty objective criteria so that no one goes out there and starts charging whatever they want and putting these vulnerable people at a situation where they then decide that they will not undertake this particular business activity, and then they go and someone else comes and uses them to undertake the activity because they have the money. So we intend to develop this fees and guideline, and which we want it to be put in place from 1st of October this year. Now, with regard to the screening application and what will require an EIA and what would not require an EIA. Now, first of all, there has to be an environmental management plan for all activity that will have an impact on the environment. So there's no doubt about not having a plan of resource extraction which will ensure that the environment is not affected. However, what we are saying is that we are now saying that there may not be a need to undertake a EIA for areas where already we have got baseline data developed by environmental management plan. For example, let's say for gravel extraction, there are a number of rivers that we already have baseline data due to extensive EIA reports that we have got over so many decades. So for gravel extraction and logging work, we're saying that based on the screening application, the department will look at its own database, and also the person who is making an application can submit those baseline data. And based on that, the department will make a decision that we already have the baseline data to develop the environmental management plan. So there is no need to do an EIA. So upon submitting a screening application, the department can say that for these waterways, we don't need an EIA, develop an EMP and submit it to us. Same thing will apply to logging areas, let's say pine forest, etc. So again, this will come into effect from 1st of October 2020. Now, in this case, as I've alluded to, we will then require them based on the data that we have and based on the other publicly available data that they can acquire. They should provide a detailed environmental management plan. Two, in this case where an EIA is not required, based on the EMP, the department will provide additional requirements that needs to be undertaken during the project life. Department will provide guidelines for the work to be carried out as per the EMP. Lastly, the department will undertake periodic random site inspection during the project life. So this again will be in case of gravel extraction and logging where we already have baseline data. Now, for those waterways and logging areas where we don't have baseline data, for example, in the case of forestry, we don't have the baseline data for species, flora and fauna, we will, based on the resources we have, or ask other international organizations to develop baseline data for us. Once we have the baseline data, then we will develop standard templates for EMP. So anyone applying for extraction for logging or gravel extraction for waterways, we will then say, this is how you manage, these are the species, flora and fauna. Now, we also now want to formally launch the EIA Green Line. Here, what we are saying is that for the purpose of this facility, we are asking companies who have undertaken EIA before and who have undertaken activities, resource extraction activities, following the guideline and EIA and EMP provided by the Ministry of Environment, that we will allow them to become our gold card client, meaning their applications will be fast-tracked. Now, for screening process, we're looking at 7 days. For processing of terms of reference, 15 days. And for EIA report, 28 days. Now, again, the criteria for them to be part of the green lane in terms of getting this particular timeline, we will look at the previous track record. Number 2, we'll look at their ability to reduce reliance on natural resources, how they have taken other environmental management practices during their in the business, such as recycling, etc. What kind of materials they procure, and how much their work is contributing also towards environmental rehabilitation, building resilience amongst our natural resources. So what we are saying is that those operators who think they meet the above criteria can apply for gold card client membership to access the green lane by providing evidence of the above. So, so basically, if they are able to demonstrate that they were, they previously they abided by the environmental management plan and EIA conditions, and they are a company which is pro-environment, and they have contributed to building resilience and enhancement, and they have also contributed to certain areas rehabilitation work. We're willing to give them a fast-track the applications and treat them like a gold card client. So we suggest that the onus is on them to apply to the Department of Environment to be classified as a gold card client. So with this announcement, I do hope that we will improve our effort to protection of environment. Number 2, build confidence amongst the investors, reduce the cost of doing business, and reduce the timeline in terms of having footprint investment on the ground. So I do hope that this will provide a positive signal to potential investors. Thank you.